Hi, I'm Christina, and in this video, I'm going to show you how I turned an outdated thrift store find like this into an updated piece with style like this, despite making a lot of beginner mistakes. Like, a lot. Maybe all of them? I also took this piece on a road trip. There was a hurricane, it was a whole thing, and yet somehow I really loved how this piece turned out in the end.
I picked up this Dixie commode at the thrift store with a coupon, which was a total bonus because the piece was well constructed, pretty sizable as far as side tables go, and the damage was mainly cosmetic. I also really loved the half dowel detailing on the drawers.
I didn't especially love the original hardware though, and overall this piece just really needed a modern update.
So I started by removing the hardware by hand, because at the time I thought using a drill instead of a screwdriver was like being extra or something. It's not. Tip number 1, embrace shortcuts. Use the drill. It's way faster and your wrists will thank you. The next step is to give your piece a good cleaning. This is where I usually grab something like Simple Green or Crud Cutter. On hot, sunny summer days, my go-to is good old-fashioned water and Dawn dish soap. But since water and wood are generally not friends, that hot sun is key. Honestly, I don't even remember what I used here. I think it was TSP cleaner like Dixie Bell's White Lightning. It's been a while. Maybe like a million DIY related breakdowns ago? But here's the real advice. Tip number 2. Clean until your towel comes away clean. That's how you know you're done. Easy peasy.
Okay, so once your piece is clean, the next step is prepping for paint or stain. Normally this involves scuff sanding or removing some or all of the finish, but this is where it started to go a little off the rails for me. You wouldn't think it needed to be said, but if you're planning on sanding down to bare wood to stain it, make sure you're working with actual, wood and not plastic. Like full on, can't handle a stain, plastic. Yeah. So tip number 3, figure out what you're working with before you come up with a plan so you're not totally off the map on step 1.
This is the moment where I first started to suspect that I might have a problem. But I was still a little confused. While the front legs were plastic, the back legs were wood. So I had this fun little Frankenstein situation going on. 2 wooden legs and 2 plastic ones. Naturally, I did what any stubborn DIYer does. I ignored the voice whispering in my head that I have a problem and I might need to change course, and I just barreled ahead with semi-shaking confidence and a paint color I'd already emotionally committed to.
So are you writing this down? Because this is a pretty high-level furniture refinishing tip. Make sure your wood isn't plastic. If you want more great advice like that, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel and hit the bell notification so you're always notified when I upload a new video. Now, even if you're just starting out, hopefully it'll be easy to tell wood from plastic, but you might struggle with figuring out the difference between solid wood, veneer, or laminate. The best place to start is by looking at the back of the top. Usually you can see layers if it's veneer or laminate. An easy way to tell if you're looking at solid wood is to look at the top and the side of the edge. If the grain pattern continues through that, it's solid wood. If the grain pattern on the side edge doesn't match with the top, then you're working with veneer or laminate. Angie over at Transcend Furniture Gallery has a really good breakdown of veneer versus laminate, so I'll link that below.
Okay, so back to the footage. Let's talk about my sanding sins. I started with 100 grit, which wasn't 80, so at least there's that. But I wouldn't start that low today. I generally like to start with 150 when I'm sanding veneer, and I take my time, because it's too easy with the lower grits to blow through the veneer before you even realize. You can also see me here removing all of the finish with that first low grit instead of slowly working my way through grits to remove it. So I should have started with 150 or even 120 and moved on to 180 before all the finish was removed so I wouldn't be removing unnecessary layers of wood. Because tip number 4, you can always sand more, but you can't put wood back on. It was sheer luck that the oak veneer was a bit thicker on this top, so I didn't blow through it. I finished off with the 220 here, but I shouldn't have skipped grits like that either. You can skip 1 grit, so you can go from 120 to 180, skipping 150, but not 100 to 220. Also, and I cannot stress this enough, my sander was never going to fit between those drawer dowels. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but points for trying, I guess. I moved on to sanding the sides and would soon make my great plastic leg discovery, but I also discovered here that the veneer on the sides was not as high quality as the top and had some patching and wood filler that the original maker had probably hidden so well with toner, which was way beyond anything I knew about at this point in time.
And if you're thinking it was finally at this point, after I had done so much unnecessary sanding and realized I wasn't going to be able to stain the base, the sides, the edge of the top, that I figured out a different plan for this piece, well, I wouldn't take that bet. I had mostly used chalk paint up to this point, but I was really excited to use the Pint of Fusion mineral paint I had bought. I picked out Bayberry, this rich, earthy, olivey green, and I thought it would pair really well with a rich, dark stain that I wasn't going to be able to do. But I had picked my color, people.
So I forged ahead anyways. I think I knew pretty early on the color wasn't going to work, but I was excited to try a new paint, so I painted both drawers. Standing back, I knew this was a miss. So tip number 5, don't be afraid to switch directions mid-project if a color or style isn't working out like you thought. It's not failure, it's editing. Think of it like a rough draft that needs revision. While I thought about the new color, I went back to fix the cosmetic damage. Now, I'm not going to label this as an actual mistake, but I used Bondo to fill a couple gouges in the top and the missing veneer on the side. And look, Bondo has its place. It's strong, it's durable, it dries faster than I emotionally recover from color regret, but it doesn't stain or paint wash well at all, and I use it on the top where I still hope to do some sort of wood finish. But that was a problem for future Christina. Bondo is perfect if you're planning to paint over it though. Also, beware of overworking it and how quickly it hardens. Trust me, you never have as much time as you think you do. Then I pulled out my detail sander to sand the Bondo flush. And I'm actually cringing a bit watching this because I can't believe I didn't sand through the veneer on this piece, but I guess luck was on my side. To patch the old hardware holes, I used Quickwood's 2-part epoxy filler, which is great, but for reasons known only to past me, I decided to cut off what I needed with popsicle sticks and one edge of my scissors. I really have no explanation for that. I had like real tools I could have used, so yeah. Tip number 6. Use actual tools for actual tasks. It's faster, it's cleaner, you won't cringe at it later. Just make sure if you're using Quickwood that you don't overfill the holes too much. It's not easy at all to hand sand if it's in a spot where your sander won't fit. Ask me how I know this. And here's a bonus tip. You should fill any hardware holes before you paint to save touch-up paint time later. I taped off the top edges with painter's tape and I got ready to prime. I used a shellac-based primer, but that was probably overkill other than on the 2 plastic front legs. Shellac primer is great for things like plastic that paint might struggle to stick to without help, but not necessary on thoroughly sanded wood unless bleed through would be a problem, which was unlikely on this one. A water-based primer would have been fine for the areas with bare wood or where I used Bondo. These days I reach for the shellac primer only if I have to because water-based primer is cheaper and not as toxic. Now here's something painful to watch. Me, absolutely overworking this paint. It's like I thought if I kept brushing it, I'd unlock some secret level where all my mistakes disappeared. You want to spend just enough time to get the paint or primer on in sections and clean up any drips, and then move on to a new section. So tip number 7, don't overwork your paint and keep it moving. Brush with confidence, smooth it out, and move on to the next area. And while I still use these foam brushes to apply shellac primer in corners, using a foam roller will get it done faster, won't disintegrate, and has better coverage. One final tip if you're using shellac-based primer, the cleanup for this is a total pain because it's not water-based, so while it might not be the most sustainable option, I usually use either the cheap foam or chip brushes to get in tight spaces and then toss them when I'm done. If you need to do more than one coat, you can plastic wrap them and refrigerate them so they don't dry out. Between coats, I did a quick hand sand to knock down texture. This part actually went right. I used this 2-sided Gator sanding sponge I love that has 220 on one side and 320 on the other. Not sponsored, just obsessed. I would recommend drilling any new hardware holes before you paint. It'll save you paint touch-ups, but also sometimes you can use the old hardware holes as a guide to centering your new ones. I used this cabinet hardware drilling jig, but to be honest, I didn't need it and ended up using it mostly to help me see a straight line between the old holes. A ruler would have been simpler and probably easier. So tip number 8, you don't need fancy tools to get great results. Start with a pencil, a ruler, and the confidence of someone pretending to know what they're doing.
So at this point, I still hadn't figured out what color or what to do with the top. So naturally, I took this furniture project along with me when I went on a road trip down south to visit my best friend for most of that summer, as one does. Because riding around with a furniture project in the back seat of your sedan is a totally normal thing to do, right? Right? I mean, who among us hasn't taken a furniture project with them when they go to visit friends and family out of state? Totally normal. But I actually hadn't accounted for the New Orleans weather, which I honestly worried about the paint curing right. Maybe I was wrong, but needless to say, I didn't actually work on it while I was at my best friend's. It just came along for the ride. It was my emotional support furniture project. Also, at the end of my trip, there was this tiny matter of the Category 5 hurricane headed straight for us. So I had to leave this piece behind at my friend's place while I fled for safety in Texas. And luckily, my friend's place and everything in it came through the storm okay. But it is technically true that this furniture piece made it through the wind, fury, and 2-week power outage of a really bad hurricane. Once I was finally home again, safe and sound, I put this away for winter and put it out of my mind.
By spring, I pulled it back out and finally felt ready to finish it. I mixed up a custom slate blue color, something calming, maybe a little moody in certain light. I had put this piece away originally because I kept trying to think of some big wow factor design, and nothing struck me. But I think that's how creativity, or even just life in general, goes sometimes. You come to a point where you don't know which way to turn, so you turn nowhere. Then eventually you come back with fresh eyes or fresh skills, and maybe you still don't have a lightning bolt of a plan, but you have a quiet next step and the determination to keep trying. You're not any less in love if you fell slowly into it instead of at first sight. And I think that, more than any small painting tip or sanding mistake to avoid, is the best lesson I have to pass on. So tip number 9, keep trying. Even if things don't go as planned and you need to step back for a while. Let your mistakes be your best teacher and just keep going. I promise it'll be worth it. I've done bigger, more complicated projects since this small furniture piece, but it remains one of my favorites because I learned so much in the process. I did a second coat of paint on the body and caulked any gaps I noticed. Paint, especially lighter paint, will reveal any seams or gaps in ways you'll never notice them when it's dark wood. Then I got to do one of my favorite things, remove painter's tape. There's nothing like revealing a clean, crisp line after you paint. I really love frog tape for this. Again, not sponsored, just a great product. I had decided to use a white paint wash on the top to be able to highlight the beautiful wood grain, but also cover up some of the imperfections. Remember how I said using Bondo on those puncture spots was a problem for future Christina? Well, it was the future. And I knew the Bondo would stand out glaringly if I stained or naturally sealed the wood, so I thought a paint wash would be the easiest way to disguise those spots but not lose the wood grain. I used a 1-to-1 mixture of water and the white paint I was planning for the drawers, let it sit for a minute, and then wiped it with a shop towel. I wanted the look to be a bit whiter, and while I could have tried using more paint in the mixture, I had this leftover white wax from another project and decided to use that because it could double as a top coat. Now, this particular wax is actually water-based, unlike usual furniture wax, so I confirmed that if I let it dry long enough, I could add another water-based top coat for further protection on top of it once I achieved the right look. I did this days later and actually forgot to record, but I just used a blue sponge to wipe on 2 separate layers of Dixie Belle's satin clear coat. I only did this on the top since in my experience, that's what needs extra protection, and Fusion Mineral Paint has a built-in top coat that would protect the rest of the piece. Now that I'd finished the body of the piece, my last step was to finish the drawers. I picked Fusion's Victorian Lace for the white. It's a soft white that's warmer than the stark white primer underneath. Whenever I'm painting smaller surfaces, I usually go for a brush that doesn't have a ton of bristles so it's not holding a lot of extra paint. I gave the areas between the dowels 2 coats of Victorian lace, let them dry overnight, and then began taping off the dowels with delicate painter's tape because I didn't want to risk peeling up my fresh paint. Then I brought in the same slate blue custom mix from the body and gave those dowels 2 clean, crisp coats. Then I took a moment to enjoy the magic of revealing those sweet, crisp lines. So satisfying, right? One of my last steps was figuring out the hardware. I had these knobs in my stash. They weren't perfect, but I liked the shape. I gave them a coat of my custom slate color, then alternated dry brushing on Fusion's coal black and midnight blue for a little depth and drama. Spring clamps are MVPs for painting hardware. They hold the knobs up so you can paint and dry them easily. Sometimes it's the small details like this that give you the opportunity to add just a bit more dimension to your project. So tip number 10, don't forget the finishing touches that pull your piece together. That's often where the magic reveals itself. I took the drawers outside and used my detail sander to give the insides a quick sanding. I didn't catch this part on film, but I rehydrated and sealed the insides with Wise Owl's furniture salve to freshen them up. I wish you could somehow smell through the screen how wonderful this stuff smells, and I love how rich the wood looks after. And then this piece was done. Is there anything more satisfying when finishing a project? That moment when you reveal your imagined design brought fully to life? I always take a step back to enjoy that for a bit, to remember where I started and revel in the quiet contentment of creativity given final form, no matter what winding path I took to get there. A short beat in the constant flow of projects to think, I did that, and it's good.
I hope you enjoyed coming along for one of my early days flips. I've definitely made mistakes since then, but I think I've made some really cool stuff too. If you're into learning by trial and error, color mixing, and sanding dust, I hope you'll stick around by liking and subscribing to my channel. And if you enjoyed this video so much that you'd like to support my channel, I'll link ways you can do that down in the description below. This channel is a labor of love for me at this point, and whoever said money can't buy you love, well, I don't think they've checked out the price of shellac-based primer lately, because it's gotten insane. But I hope you'll stick around because some of the things coming up on the channel are a coffee table I rescued from the side of the road that just wouldn't do anything I wanted it to, a dresser and nightstand combo that belonged in orange wood jail, and a 3-bedroom, 5-day extreme beach house makeover that very nearly broke me and my sister. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.